Okay, I'm Nancy Zach, and I'm very happy to be here. It's November 26th, and I'm with our guest, Trina Paulus, who is a friend and an author of a book that many of us know and love, which is her Hope for the Flowers book, and which has been translated in 20 languages, you said.
I'd say.
Yes. So Trina is not only an author, but she is an activist from Montclair, New Jersey. And I wanted to talk with her about some of the things that she remembers from the time period when ironbound residents were doing much work trying to clean up toxic waste in the neighborhood and trying to stop new pollution and new polluting facilities from coming into the neighborhood. So one of the new facilities that we were fighting, and I believe it is when we got involved with you, Trina, was the Essex County garbage incinerator, which was proposed at that time during the early 80s, I think. And so can you tell me a little bit about why a person from Montclair would get interested in fighting a garbage incinerator in Newark, and how you found out about it? And
well, I can't remember everything. That's quite a while ago. But I certainly do remember that I was involved with GRIO, Grassroots Environmental Organization, and I probably heard about this problem because they were planning 21 incinerators throughout the state, one for every county. And so that seemed just an awful thing to do. I was also very involved since 1983 when we started Cornucopia Network of New Jersey to what to do with our what we call waste, with the idea that if you handle things right, there's very little stuff that really can't be handled or recycled. And tests were done during that period by Barry Commoner and people in, I remember in Long Island, they were getting from 70 to 95% recycling in different towns, because if you, for instance, take your food waste and you recycle it, then it doesn't become a mess in a landfill or any place, and you don't have to pick up garbage very often because everything is dry, and the food waste then doesn't help leach out the heavy metals into the landfill. So incinerators seem the worst of all these things, because also you end up without, it's not a total problem. People like to think, away, you know, pick it up and they throw it and burn it, but we have like 40 to 45% of wet, awful, toxic ash that's left has to be put in a landfill someplace. So what do we get rid of? And we use huge amounts of water, we destroy resources, and we have the health issues. Okay, learning that kind of thing, I said, they won't do that in Montclair or suburban Essex. And it just seemed so wrong that they would then do it in the Ironbound. I can't remember just exactly what came first, but I was aware of the shamrock, diamond shamrock place, and the toxins and furans and things that were polluting Ironbound. I was on a number of tours of the toxic sites. So one day I decided I needed to do something. And because of my book, Hope for the Flowers, which was the only thing I ever did that made money, I was able to take time to do that kind of thing. So I came down to the Ironbound Corporation headquarters, which is a little storefront on another street. What street? Was that on Ferry Street?
95 Fleming Avenue.
Fleming Avenue. Well, I came there and Arnold was there, and probably Madeline had told me that this was a place to come. And I remember asking him to tell me about this and train me so I could be helpful. And he showed me a filing cabinet, said, you're free to just go through this and take anything, learn anything you want. And then I remember asking him that day, I said, you know, you're up against some really powerful people and corporations, and how do you not get into trouble with that? He says, never know anything just by yourself. Always share the knowledge with someone so that you're not the only one that knows something, so you're much less likely to get bumped off. So That was a lesson I've kept in mind all these years, whether it was peace activism or whatever else I was doing. But I was very active with Paul. I learned from Paul Connett. I know that in Montclair, I didn't do as much as what I did with everybody, because I was working with the whole. I wanted to get those incinerators down from 21 to. We got it down to 3. I went to the other sites where they were built kind of incinerators and marched and had my banners and made posters and things, and so it just seemed so totally wrong, and it's proved to be wrong. It's proved to be wrong, and the asthma problem here and the children here, and the fact that this stuff goes up to the Arctic and you get the mercury from the incinerators. Maybe not this one, but who knows whose incinerator it's from. Could be ours. And it's just such a wrong way to go. One of the things I have here is that sometimes it's not, landfilling is not a good solution. Recycling is the ideal thing, as much as possible. But if you recycle as much as possible and then you landfill the other until we're smart enough to figure out what to do with things. One of the saddest moments for me was when Jean Clark, in front of this big hearing in Montclair, sponsored by the League of Women Voters, came out in favor of the incinerators because they couldn't figure out what to do with used tennis shoes. Mm. I mean, the used tennis shoes became almost the symbol of why we needed incinerators, because we couldn't recycle used tennis shoes.
And you could have used tennis shoes to some place where people needed shoes.
Well, maybe you could have done that, or you could have. That could have gone in a landfill. It would have been a very small thing to do, and then you didn't have. They wouldn't have degraded and contaminated the water. Used tennis shoes by themselves, unless you have something bleaching and taking out whatever bad stuff is in those. Okay, so that's part of how I got involved. It was my sense of justice. My sense of justice ever since I was a little girl was pretty acute. And I had just also come back from Egypt. Well, that wasn't just coming back from Egypt. We're talking about the years about 1986 that I was involved with this. But in 1966, I went to Egypt and worked in a place where the girls' fathers, who I worked with to develop a women's co-op in the south of Egypt, in Akhmim, made $50 a year. Mm. Now, because Egypt was a socialist country under Nasser, the basic foodstuffs were subsidized until the World Bank and the IMF came by and said, you can't subsidize food, it has to be on a free market. So riots and people were killed. But when I was there, nobody died in the streets. It wasn't like Calcutta, because people were, so the sense of injustice, and you come back to this country and you see so much injustice going on. So that was a big dominating thing. I'm Catholic, and our social teachings are really very excellent. Unfortunately, most people just know about sex issues right now, but our social teachings in favor of unions, in favor of all these justice issues are so good, but a pretty hidden secret.
And you were able to involve a network in Montclair against this incinerator, right?
I guess I was, but Gray Russell was very active with that. I was sort of more involved in Newark and down here, and with that first struggle. The second struggle came in 1999, and that's worth bringing up too, because in 97, a judge struck down the requirement that every town bring their goods to this incinerator. That was illegal to demand the towns. They should be free to bring their stuff in any way. If they wanted to landfill it, to do it. But every town is getting its arm twisted by Treffinger to go along with it, because what do they do with this behemoth that they built if they don't fill it?
He was the county executive.
That's right. He was the county executive. I think he's been in jail since then. So anyhow, that's where we really did mobilize in Montclair. And Montclair was the last bastion holding out, and we did manage to change the contract a bit in the favor of the towns, or all the towns, because they had this horrible put or pay. contract, like if a town was going to give them 11,000 tons, for example. If they managed to recycle 7 of those, they still had to pay as though they put in 11,000 tons. We got that taken care of, that out. I don't know where it's at and where it's evolved to now. I haven't kept up with this, but we felt that was just horrendous as an anti. Why would you want to try to recycle if you're going to have to pay for an agreed amount, big amount anyhow? Mm-hmm. So it's a really anti-recycling and anti-proper use of reused resources. I was also very involved, Nancy, during this time with understanding more deeply that it's not only humans that had rights. Environmental justice meant two things for me. It meant you don't put something like an incinerator where people already are suffering from a lot of pollution. But you really shouldn't put an incinerator any place, because the earth can't handle a certain amount, and we're coming to that. We're at the tipping point now where the earth is almost too wounded to recover. Hopefully it can if we stop polluting and doing fracking and horizontal gas stuff and all the things that are going on today, and building pipelines across New Jersey to ship our gas overseas while we destroy our own environment. I mean, how crazy can people be?
So you're still involved in the environmental justice issues, right?
Yes, but it's also justice for the mountains and the streams and the earth itself. There's a justice issue not just for people. So I'm still involved. I try to be less involved so I can work at my books and get some new books out and things, but those emails every day.
Do you remember, so you said you were in Newark, you probably remember some of the marches or
oh, yes,
some of the public hearings on the incinerator?
Yes, I do, and I don't remember them so well. I remember the sludge. I was more of one of the leaders constantly in the sewage sludge issue.
Okay, talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
What is sludge? Start with that.
We have a sewage treatment plant called, a very strange name, PVSC, Passaic Valley Sewage Commissioners. Well, that's not the plant, but that's what it's called. And it's on the edge of Newark because they used to dump everything in the ocean. And they do the sewage treatment for 4 industrial counties. And that's not a small matter if you're trying to get clean sludge.
Sludge is what's left after
they take the water out, yes. Okay. And so the sludge used to be dumped 6 miles out, became a dead zone. Then they had to do it 100 miles out, it became a dead zone. Then the Clean Water Act was passed, and they couldn't do it anymore. So this process that I was active in from like 91 to 96 was an effort to find a better way to do it.
And they had a proposal that they were going to incinerate it,
yes. Right? But that's only one of the proposals, one of the many awful proposals. It was just one awful solution after another, and the one they had finally arrived at
isn't really a solution.
It's horrible. It's horrible. It puts this toxic sludge on our farmlands to raise our food, and it gets into us and our animals. I actually went to, I did a lot there. I was even, I with Grant Consolea, who lived right near the proposed, it wasn't an incinerator by the time we were working together. It was a lime stabilization thing that was going to heat things up by lime, make it so alkaline that it goes up to measurement of 13, which is like burning. And they were going to haul these trucks through the streets of Ironbound to this place from the edge of So it's still an Ironbound problem. It was on Avenue A there. And I remember Grant and I going at midnight to find out where those trucks were taking stuff. Because they were taking stuff to Virginia. They were taking stuff to in Ohio, near where my family grew up. They were taking stuff to Pennsylvania, out Route 80, Carolyn Vidala and I went to a place 2/3 through Pennsylvania and were received by some lovely EPA people who were in charge of this, and shown where our sewage sludge was dumped on strip mines and in their beautiful forests. Nancy, I still have an unopened bottle of that stuff that I got from Pennsylvania that time. Our stuff. If anybody, I don't know if an archive ever wants a thing like that. An unopened bottle of sewage sludge, lime-treated.
So again, you got your neighbors involved in the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission.
That's right.
Fight.
Yeah.
And you went to PVSC commissioners meetings many
for 5
times.
Years.
For 5 years.
Every month for 5 years. That was one of the biggest things I ever did. This is what Madeline and I did. I just think it's a kind of an interesting thing. This is how I met Carolyn Vidala, and she joined me in the sewage sludge thing. This was March 9th, 1995. This was getting toward the end. She said she wanted to see what 2 women were dealing with solid waste and what one of them had to say about sewage sludge. Because it was a kind of odd thing for a woman to be engaged in.
You were speaking all around Essex County at different venues, right? At different meetings, churches?
No, I wasn't doing so much of that, but I was videotaping too the meetings, and it was just, you know, this is some of the wonderful people who are Citizens Environmental Coalition. This is Albany, New York, and then this is the Rachel Environmental Newsletter with our good friend and beautiful friend Peter Montague.
Right.
A new U.S. waste policy emerges. This is 97. The horrible thing that they pushed. Okay, I did a big switcheroo. I started out believing we could have beneficial use. And the first couple of years we were trying to just get the heavy metals down from industry. Because what's interesting is that we public people, the taxpayers, have the job to take care of industry's waste. Through this, they just dump it in the sewers or the rivers. And it's our job then to pay for it and to take care of it. It's not exactly a fair trade here.
Not at all.
Not at all. The externalities are not much considered here. And externalities are the costs that society has to bear that are not figured usually in a company's cost-benefit analysis. They can pass that on. They pass it on to others. So this was a big, it just all made me mad, but you've got to figure out your strategies too. And our singular success was through our beautiful people who helped lead this. It was Carrie Butch, and I can't remember the first the community person who was working with you.
Was it Anna Estevez?
No.
Okay.
No, it was before that. And she was getting her law degree at the same time too. And so she contacted Gene Fox in EPA District Number 2 out of New York City. And they then did not let this big thing happening on Avenue A on the environmental justice issue. We won that one. That's about the only big struggle I've ever been part of where anything was won.
Right, because it was a proposal for the world's largest, I remember they kept talking about that, the world's largest sludge incinerator.
Was that going to be at that same site?
Yes.
And by the time I got deeply involved, it was going to be this alkali stabilization thing, which was still going to haul everything through the streets of Newark, which was still not a good thing.
Right, right.
So, and we still have this awful policy in place, and we wonder why we have polluted foods and health food problems. It's really bad.
Do you remember Grant going in the demonstrations with a casket and dressed as an undertaker?
Oh yes, I remember Grant doing that, and I remember first meeting Grant at one of these evening things where the DEP, a big special community hearing, And we didn't know Grant the first time. And he stands up in his full stature and just lays it to these men sitting up there. All men, of course.
Right,
So
all in their suits.
In their suits. And this is what I thought just to show the kind of involvement. This is our cornucopia newsletter from back in those days. And this one I just happened across this morning. But the sludge biosolids phenomena here.
Mm-hmm.
And we really did a big job.
You were exploring the alternatives and trying to find the better alternatives all the way along.
Yes, and I switched. In the beginning, there was what they called the Clean Sludge Coalition. Don Clark and Arnold and Madeline were all part of that. And I came in a little later. And I think somebody from the NRDC, which was probably funding it, because I think there was a grant for a while, they believed more than I did that we could get it clean. We never did get it clean enough to do this job. And also I become aware more recently that the regular sewage process, which all sewage processes rely largely on microorganisms neutralizing these things. But now that we're using hand sanitizers and we have a lot of waste in our bodies from drugs and everything, any antibiotic, it goes against the microbial activity, and this stuff does not process through the sewage treatment. That's not something I was aware of during my time when I was very active, but it's really a big problem.
So what do you see as the alternatives now? Now that is that
composting toilets in homes, and what you do about living machines. I mean, composting toilets, because what we're doing, we're also expanding this idea around the world that civilized people use water and flush 0.5% of solids into a clean water, then contaminates the water and produces contaminated sludge, which we then have to clean up. So the real solution is not to put it in the first place, to compost sewage sludge. I lived at Grailville, by the way, and I came in 1949 to Grailville. We composted all of our human waste every day in 5-gallon buckets, and it's very doable, especially if you have a community or people don't take drugs, and you eat clean, especially if you eat organic food. Your waste then can do what we had always hoped could be done, that the nutrients in human waste and animal waste and manure and all, that can be returned to the earth safely. But not from Essex County, not from Bergen, not from this outfit.
Right, and as soon as you are so correct that as soon as the incinerator got built, there were problems right from the beginning with that.
And you, of course, know more about that. You followed through with it.
Yes, there were explosions and people went to the hospital because somebody poured the wrong chemical water on something that was in the incinerator, so chemicals were in
really?
there. Yeah.
Because I followed it kind of all the way through, but you know, when one gets immersed in this, it's almost a 24-hour thing during a period of time when you're still hoping that you can win it.
Can you talk a little about those meetings that you covered for the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission? Do you remember any memorable moments there, or was it pretty boring? Was Donald Tucker still on the...
Oh yes, Donald Tucker was there, our councilperson from Newark.
Right.
And we challenged them. Oh, they didn't like to see us come. They had to let us in the public meetings, and then they also let us in a lot of the meetings prior to that. Then I started videotaping, and then they said it was illegal, and then we found out it was not illegal, so they had to let us videotape too. And so we spoke almost every time about things. For a long time I was hoping that composting would indeed take down the volume of this sludge, so there'd be less to travel with, and it would to some degree purify it. But with all the heavy metals in, also they did make a rule about heavy metals, but who goes out to these farmers' fields and tests whether they're fulfilling this? I haven't heard of any testing going on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's these rules about heavy metals. And then they were going to make rules about things like furans, dioxins,
So rules
PCBs, but they never did.
Prohibiting heavy metals from
That's
being...
the only rule that was ever made, that they had to be used for putting on farms, it had to reach a certain quality. But who tests for it?
Right. No enforcement.
It's like Monsanto testing for genetic engineering. They get the results they want.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what goes on with this sort of thing.
And do you know that they got flooded during Sandy?
Oh, of
And
course.
they got totally closed because of the water that came in, and I don't even know if they're back at full operation, and we're 3 or 4 weeks after the hurricane right now. So all that sewage has been going right into the water.
And it frequently does when there's an overflow that's smaller than Sandy.
Right. I know it still does when there's a certain rain event or
Yes.
whatever. But
Yes.
this one, the entire place was filled with water from this wave that came over. So now they're talking about building a 10-foot wall around it to keep the water out, which will be another boondoggle, right, Trina, for our taxes. I don't know. We'll have to see if whether that actually comes to pass. So do you see all this? You're still involved with the sludge, looking for alternatives, and you see this somehow flowing from your hope for the flowers.
Well, I see all these things are a piece. You know, the emergency right now is, I don't know that we're going to change the sludge policy easily. It would take a lot of energy focused on that to do it. And right now we have to keep this fracking business from going on. This whole gas, to destroy our whole earth to get gas so that America becomes the #1 oil and gas producer in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And these are some of the urgent things right now. So mostly I sign petitions for that. I'm not doing much of the going out. And of course global warming, which that's all part of. That's the raising of the temperature beyond which life of any kind, human and other, can exist, is happening. We are already above it.
How did you and your neighbors and your ironbound colleagues, how do you stop, as you said, some of these are very powerful corporations or very powerful public figures. How do you get them to change direction? What are the tactics that people use?
I'm praying more. I don't know. I don't know how I can get Obama to change enough for his policies and his support of some of this stuff. His genetic engineering support is dreadful. He's appointed all the wrong people, Monsanto people in charge of the FDA and the USDA. So how do I work with that? Which is my major, my foods. But see, everything's related to everything. People say, well, how are you involved with an incinerator or sewage sludge if you're really focused on food? Well, you put sludge on farmland, you don't get clean food. You really can't. If you burn it and have all this bad stuff coming out, and you waste it by burning your food scraps instead of composting them, you're not respectful of the resources God's given us. So all this stuff fits together, and one emergency flows into the other. I've decided for myself right now, at the age of 81, that I should focus on getting my sequels that I've been working on for 20 years out, and doing some more of that kind of work to perhaps influence in a different way, to help people's mentality change from a rather self-centered, let me get my piece of the pie, and it doesn't matter what happens down the road too much.
Is that one of the values that's in the book itself?
Oh, absolutely, because in the book we have this image. We have the image of these caterpillars, and they know that they have to stop eating, and they're looking for what the more of life is for them. And they see this pillar. Well, everybody's climbing that, so it must be very good, because everybody's going there. So they get on it, and it's a horrible place. You have to everything becomes a step that you can step over, not something in itself, not another caterpillar to look into their eyes. You don't look into eyes when you're on that sort of pillar. You just climb over. And of course, for a caterpillar, we all know what they're supposed to do. Everybody knows that all around the world. So they're supposed to go into a cocoon, and then they can come out and they can fly, and they can get just as high as they want. And there's room in the sky for everyone. So that's sort of the message of it. Obviously, there's a justice thing here. If you crawl, and there's a lot, it has to be a big base down at the bottom to hold your crawling. So it is a justice issue. That was written before I got so involved with these.
Right, so the values kind of flow into
and that work. Came after my first time in Egypt, where I saw such discrepancy of wealth. And then coming back to this country where there still is its terrible discrepancy of wealth, which is greater now than it's ever been.
The 1%.
So we have the Occupy movement, which is the same. My concern is that for revolutions that are deeply spiritual enough that people change their greed habits. If they don't do it, the danger is that they just keep knocking the top guys off, and then they become just like those top guys until someone else knocks them off. So it's kind of a circular revolution. That's what I was trying to write the book about. That's not the way the revolution should go. This book was born in the 60s. When revolution was in the air, and I was in Paris during the 1968 when Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were assassinated, and just coming in out of Egypt. I was evacuated at the end of the Six-Day War in Egypt, and I ended up in Paris at our International Grail Center there. And I saw a revolution happening right there in Paris with the students and the workers almost taking down the country at that time in 1968. And I visited an art museum in Brussels, a big art museum, where the kids were sleeping in sleeping bags in the big hall under the Rembrandts. Now, that's like in the Metropolitan main hall, to imagine sleeping bags and everything. And I remember asking one of those young men, do you really think if you break down the whole old order that something good will come? Yes, he said. And I realized I wasn't sure of that, because I thought a person who likes power like a Hitler would more likely come in the breach at that time. And so that's when my Hope for the Flowers grew out of that, this story. And
there it is.
It's very interesting. The only country that never put this text on the front is a pirated version in Iran. A pirated version means I didn't know it existed, and someone sent it to me finally, so I'm glad it's there anyhow. But a tale partly about life, partly about revolution, and lots about hope for adults and others, including caterpillars who can read. So it has a certain humor and a lightness, but it's a pretty serious book, too. Partly about revolution. The Chinese kept the word, the Russians kept the word, the Thai kept the word, everybody kept the word, except Iran took this whole thing off. So I don't think they want to put the word revolution on the cover of a book. I don't think that looks good in Iran, do you? So,
well, one of the things that strikes me is that without the help from the Montclarians and the others in Essex County, like Gray, and thinking back to that period, and it is a long time since, you know, many years ago, but just as in Newark, there's divisions between the different wards, and they love to keep us apart, and sometimes when we cross wards, it really creates a strength. And I think what happened in those struggles against the garbage incinerator and for better sludge alternatives, I think that it was so key to have because the voice of the Newarkers was a voice, but it became a magnified, a bigger voice.
Yes. We did get all but 3. Unfortunately, we have 3, but we got the others out.
Yes. And I think the connections between the people in the suburbs and the people in the inner city.
That's right.
That were built during that time.
Essex County is very special in that it really does have intrinsically these connections. This is the courthouse seat. This is the whole thing. And of course there's all this talk always about seceding, these richer towns to secede from, because a great deal of our tax burden comes from supporting the county and this county seat here. So, but I never was for any of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not for any kind of secession. I'm for let's work together. Can't we all work together, like Rodney King said, you know? Why can't we all get along?
Right.
And
okay, Trina,
so
thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay.